Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to 24/7 Magazine's webinar, Clinical Engineering Excellence, a New Model to Drive Team Effectiveness, sponsored by PartSource. I'm Carrie Forsyth-Stevens, the editor of 24/7 Magazine and your host. I'm here with an excellent speaker, Blake Collins, the Clinical Engineering Director of a large Mid-Atlantic health system. Mr. Collins has been in the medical equipment field for more than 24 years and the healthcare industry for more than 34 years. After the presentation, Mr. Collins will answer as many questions as he can live. So throughout the webinar, submit your questions via the Q&A box on your screen. Also, the complete slide deck is available for PDF download. Refer to the box on the right-hand side of your screen which says Slide Deck for Download and click on the link anytime during the webinar. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Blake Collins.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that kind introduction. First, I'd like to a little bit about myself. I've been doing this for 24 years, as was mentioned. I spent 21 years in the Navy. I was working in medical equipment for a majority of that time. Worked with a large organization up in Indianapolis, and then came here to the Mid-Atlantic. And I've been doing this for a few years. I just would like to mention that the title says a new model to drive team effectiveness. For many folks, it will be a new model. For some folks, it's how you do business. So we'll just go from there. If you learn anything out of it, then that'll be great. So just a little bit about my organization. We're a large private employer. We have a lot of different outpatient services. We have 120 physical addresses. Net operating revenue of $1.6 billion. As you can go through and see that, U.S. admissions of 53,000, surgeries of 38, ED visits 187. That puts us at the 21st busiest emergency department in the country, and 6,400 births a year. Just a quick snapshot of what we manage here at our organization is, as I said, 121 physical addresses. We have 9 imaging centers, bunch of different cardiac diagnostic centers, surgery centers. We manage 26 CTs, 15 MRs, 6 linear accelerators, a bunch of cath labs, just a grouping of equipment that we have to give a little bit of size and scope to the organization. I currently have 33 staff. I have it broken up. There's 10 biomeds, 7 imaging, 4 inspectors, and 1 lab. Also 3 sterilizer focus folks. Then they also do OR tables and the booms and lighting. I have 3 supervisors for each of the groups because I've broken my department down into 3 groups, which is the biomed group, the imaging group, and what I call support, which is my inspectors and the sterilizer groups. The inspectors that we have, which is a little different than most organizations, is their concentration is on the high volume, low acuity devices that take up a lot of your PM time. And so they focus on that, and they're not biomeds. It's a stepping stone into the biomed realm, but they're not biomeds. And it really lets us focus on turning a wrench versus the mundane PMs. So some of the things that we want to look at is how do we start to revitalize, reorganize your organization? Is you plan your work your plan, and then why do you want to do this? Is the financial, for obvious, your response time, your service completion. The one thing you don't want to do is do this for kingdom building. You don't want to be the king of the domain. It doesn't really go over well, and a lot of people look at it negatively. But our organization, they wanted financial reductions, as well as they didn't want to lose any of the response that they were already feeling with the contracts, because we were very highly contracted, and so that was one of our, many of our goals that we were looking at. So what we want to do is plan our work. So we start by looking at our inventory. You look at your contracts, you look at your existing staff and their competencies, and then your customer and your C-suite appetite for change and risk, all of which have to be there, because if if you don't have the inventory to do it, it's going to be difficult. And so you just got to really look at all of that. Start by looking at your inventory. So what are the OEMs that you have? What are the vendors that you have? What is your variation in your equipment and your modalities? And where's the low-hanging fruit, your high-cost devices and your high-service issues? So if I have 50 anesthesia machines and they're all under contract, well, obviously that's a target that we can hit by training my own folks internally and going down that. And what's the story that that your inventory is telling you? Your contracts. Look at your vendors. How many OEM contracts or third-party contracts do I have? What are the numbers? When we were here, I had 27 contracts, each individual device on the imaging on one organization. I had almost 35 on another organization. And so look at that, and how can you combine these into one contract that's coterminous? And then look at the types of contracts you have. Are they all full service? Are they parts only, first look, etc.? And just get a handle on what you have and look at that. And then also look at your equipment that you have that are high dollar equipment that don't necessarily have contracts, but you're spending a lot of time and material money on. Look at your existing staff, their competencies in imaging. If you're going to tackle imaging, what experience do you have in the imaging? If so, what areas? Are they CT, general X-ray, MR, etc.? Your high-end biomed experience. Do you have the anesthesia, the ventilator training? Then you look, and do you need to hire people with those skills? Do you need to train to those skills? Do you build your own? Do you start with a basic biomed and train them into imaging, etc.? Look at all of that. Then you have a competency tool that I created that I use to help assess that. And this is just a quick sample. I know it's really busy, really difficult to see. But this is for a senior biomed, and it goes through, the general biomed procedures, and do you understand what you're looking at? Do you really know what it is? And then can you perform it? And then judge them on that, looking at whether, this is based on verbalization, classroom, you watching them, and you go through that. And I first have them do the assessment, and then we use that on their quarterly evaluation to go through and see, are we making progress? Are we looking for anything? You can also use this as your folks who want to progress from a Biomed 1 to a 2 or from a 2 to a 3 and say, and to help goal set and set those expectations with your folks. And this is just the second part of it. Again, I apologize for the size of it. But, as you go through, it's easier. And we have these for all of the different job descriptions within the department. Then you have to develop your customer appetite for change, because most of the time your customers don't know what they don't know. They don't really understand that they could get better service response internally. You have to talk to the department heads, have to talk to your administration, your C-suite. Show them the data, what it is that they're getting versus what it is you can perform for them, and just communicate. That is so key, is just talking to people, listening to what they have to say, really listen to what they have to say, and then use that to put together your plans and how you want to head things off. Next, you want to work your plan. So we already looked at the inventory. So what was the story that it told us? Where are my opportunities? Where's that low-hanging fruit? Where are my high volumes of equipment or high dollar spends? And then let's look at how we can attack that and create training plans around that. Look at your contracts. Evaluate, reduce, and change. So again, can I create one large contract from many smaller contracts that have coterminous dates easy to have the same terms and conditions. Most of the time the vendors will give you cost reduction, cost considerations, just by combining them all into one versus having to manage so many, because it's difficult for them to manage as well as it is for you. And then look at what types of contracts they are. Can you have a first look? Do you have the people that are trained? I suggest when you're looking at some of the larger vendors, put a roll-down process in there. So as your folks get more experience, more training, you can take some of the devices from a full service to a first look or whichever level that is in there, and try to get that so you can evaluate that at least annually, preferably semi-annually, to be able to roll that down and then bring more cost consideration to your organization. Look at the staff. Again, the competencies, develop, hire, or train, whichever is there, and look at that, and then create a customer communication plan. Who are you going to talk to? How often are you going to talk to them? And who are your key customers that you're going to look at? Again, looking at the inventory, what story does it tell? The areas to focus on. Where's that low-hanging fruit, as I've said? Multiples of the same model, high numbers of failures. May not have a whole lot of devices, but we have a whole lot of failures. So how can we reduce the downtime to our folks and get that training? Low response rates. The vendors, we all have them. The vendors that just really don't respond as quickly as we would like them to. And look at that. And then the high service costs, especially those that don't have contracts, and breaking that down and looking at what you have. Contracts, as we said, some of the things we want to look at with the contracts is consolidate as much as you can. As I mentioned, the vendors will discount typically. Not all will, but a lot of them will. Adding your roll-down features, as we had mentioned, adding easy-out clauses. Some vendors will do it. Some will not, as we all have probably experienced. But the worst thing they can say is no. So you keep trying, you keep poking. Eventually they're going to say yes. You hope anyway. Add training support. Make sure that is in there so that they will train your folks. If you can, when you're looking at your contracts, do tube pools. And detector pools. So, if you have individual contracts and you have tubes and detectors covered, you're basically buying a tube and detector for each unit every year, essentially. So, if you can pool them, that's what it's easier to do. Get yourself, we have 16 cath labs. I have 3 detectors or tubes a year, actually 2 now this year. So after that, I get a significant discount. So just look at that, because that's what my typical usage is in a year. Make sure that the devices that are you don't have full coverage on, that you have software key access. A lot of times you have to get the vendor training, but get those software keys and make sure that that's written into your contract. And then look at your parts and services ordering centralization, just for your general bench stock and all the other parts that you get. I want my techs working on equipment. I don't want them spending their day on the phone sourcing parts, looking for that one part that costs $300 and calling 5 different people. It's a waste of their time, and I've already just lost my savings by the amount of time that they're on the phone. So have them turn in the wrench. That's what you need them to do. And then look again when you're looking at your contracts. Not all contracts are bad. You have to do your evaluation and which ones make the most sense. Staff and your competencies. Again, hire or train based on your low-hanging fruit that we've already mentioned. What I've always looked at, very importantly within my organization, is I want to hire the right person. I hire for ability and I train to skill. Most of the time it'll take a little bit longer, depends on what you're looking at. But it will pay off. You have that, you have the associate, they are looking at you, they have the engagement within the organization. Then you have the customers, they know this person and they like them, hopefully, and you build that relationship. And as I said, it will take a little bit longer, but it does pay off in the end. The customer, again, looking at your departments, your key departments, imaging, OR, radiation oncology, women's health, etc. Set up quarterly meetings, and what we have is I have it set for both internal and external at the same time. Is I set up a 2-hour meeting, and I spend half the time just talking internally to the different groups, and then I have the vendors come in, the different large contracts that are within that particular group, and have them come in, and we all talk to them at the same time and address concerns or praise, and always try to end the meetings on a positive note. That's always better. And then swing by frequently just to see how things are going. Have your technicians do the exact same thing. It gets them in the department. It gets their faces known. It gets you known, and your customers are more willing to reach out to you. Communicate. I've said that before. And when we come through all the time, my folks, they get, the customers will reach out to my technicians for pretty much anything. I mean, some areas, they were having a hard time getting their light bulbs changed, so they asked us, what can we do to help them? It wasn't necessarily that we were going to go in there and change the light bulbs, but we helped them get that taken care of and resolved. We have on our sleeves, your solution provider. So we're there. We want to provide those solutions. We don't necessarily are going to do the work, but we will provide a solution. Challenges. So this is probably the toughest right there, is with your staff, is changing their mindset. The customers they'll get there, but your staff is getting them on board. So one of the things one of the adages that I've taken with me over my time is, you change the people or you change the people. It may sound a little harsh, but over time it does end up a little differently. When I started here at this organization, I had 22 technicians. I now have 33, but 20 of them are new within the last 5 years. So we had some turnover of the folks that didn't really want to change, and all of the folks, with a few minor exceptions, that we've been able to hire since I've been here are still here, so which is good. And we have a very high associate satisfaction rate as well. Customer support, get them on board and involved every step of the way. Make sure they know who's going to training, when they're going to training, all of the different things, all of the rollbacks, all of the different changes that you're going to do. Some were easier than others, and some will push back. And you got to have those crucial conversations and let them know, especially what some of the changes are, what they need to do differently, as well as what you're going to be doing differently. So how do you know that you're succeeding? So you ask them. You're already walking through. You're already talking to them. You're having your quarterly meetings. Ask them, how are we doing? What can we do better? Look at your budgets. That's where you're looking at your C-suite. And how much you're spending. When we started, we were running at our contract spend was 79% of our overall spend. We were able to get it down to less than 39. It's still a little high, depending on what you're looking at, but we're working there. We're getting down there. As they say, slow and steady wins the race. You're building that competencies and all of that within the organization, and the confidences. We saved about over $10 million in the last 5 years of true savings and cost avoidances. And again, as I said, we've added 10 folks. We also expanded our service. We did not do any service outside of the main hospitals. All of of those 121 external, we didn't do any service out there, and now we handle all of that service, and it's all within us. And then 28 will be the first time we hit the same budget since 2012, so that's pretty good. Major milestones, budget reduction. We set the goal that we would want to do a 10% reduction based on cost to service ratio every year. I believe we've gotten there. The cost of service reduction, we were just at 9%, 8.9 to less than 5. So we wanted to hit 1 point per year. When we created this, it was 4.5, and I just finalized my FY19 budget, and we're projected to be at 4.1%. We service all of our imaging, like I said, the inpatient and outpatient, and we did that within 2 years, and we took on all of our high-end biomed equipment. And then customer sat surveys. We created those. Our organization doesn't really like the 1 to 5, 1 to 10 scale. They like the anecdotal. I do too. Tell me the story, to your customers. Tell me what it is that we're doing well, what we're not doing well, and how we can do that better, and then put that into play, and then communicate back with them. Well, this is what we did based on what you said, and walk down through that. So far we've been pretty successful, I believe. That's my presentation. Are there any questions?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Blake. And yeah, we're now going to do a brief Q&A session. And in addition to our presenter, Blake Collin, Jason Meister from our sponsor PartSource is also available to answer any questions. Okay, below is the first question. You mentioned a checklist assessment. What type of things do you review in the assessment, and how did you apply the information?
So as I had mentioned, we went through and we looked at all the different types of equipment that the different skill levels would be expected to work on. Obviously, since I have a separate sterilizer group, I don't have sterilizers with my biomeds, and I don't expect them to be able to perform the PMs. What is a sterilizer? How does it perform? What are some of the key pieces to it? Sure. They may get called in on a weekend for something not working right, and at least having that basic understanding. And then as we go through it, it's a two-way communication from the tech to us and the leadership to understand where they're going, where they're at, and how do we apply that forward. And we did use that to create goals and goal setting for them for their annual and quarterly evaluations.
Great. How did you decide which vendors to consolidate, and how long did it take to make these changes?
So the vendors that we went to consolidate, again, were based on the spend and the complexity of the equipment. Imaging always tends to float to the top first. That's where your high dollars are. That's where we had our greatest successes, was there with the imaging vendors and creating the master service agreements with them. Some of the vendors, some of the contracts, it took a little bit of different time for each one. One vendor I was done in about 6 months. The other took us 18 months to get through the contracting process.
Great. And your teams work together now on part orders, and I mean the biomed, the clinical engineering, et cetera.
So what we do, one of the good things that we've been able to do is using our CMMS is excuse me, I was able to also, we have a parts ordering person within our department, and all of our parts flow through there, as well as the essentially warehousing. So each one of my facilities has its own office, and we want to be able to move our supplies within the organization. It's a lot cheaper. So if my one hospital has the part, the other hospital needs it, instead of ordering a new one, we just ship it around and move our inventory from site to site. And so that gets my techs talking, it gets my parts person talking with all of them, and making sure we have what we need and when we need it, which is key.
Great. And how were you able to decrease the cost of service ratio, and what areas gave you cost savings?
So so when you're reducing your cost of service ratio, which is the cost of service ratio is what it costs to maintain a device based on what you paid for the device. And that's a static number. It doesn't change. We don't apply depreciation on that. That's more on the accounting side. We just go from the day it was purchased. It's not perfect way, but it's a really good way. So we went through there, again, looking at your high spend, high volume things. Where am I getting that where am I going to get the best benefit? And the areas that gave us that cost savings was primarily imaging and the high-end biomed equipment, ventilators, anesthesia, etc.
Great. And you mentioned adding new people. What are their roles, and how are you able to get buy-in to have additional headcounts?
Good. Yeah, because in today's environment, nobody really wants to allow you to add new people. So what I did is I showed them the story. I put the data together that said, all right, I'm going to take this imaging, and I'm going to reduce my imaging cost by $500,000 or whatever number I used at the time, but I need a person to be able to do this. I need to train someone to be a CT specialist, for instance. And so by doing that, then I'm going to be able to reduce my cost a couple $100,000 at a clip. And so being able to save that, they were more willing to do that. And you just got to show them the data, show them what you can do. And then after you've done it and you demonstrate those savings, again, show that back to, the finance people, your C-suite. Look what we were able to do by adding these people in the department. And, it's not easy, easy peasy as they say, but it's worth it, and you definitely get to build that reliance within your own people versus relying on your outside vendors.
Wonderful. And we have a lot of reader questions, so I will try to get to as many as I can. Here's one. As far as your COSR, how do you capture all outside service reports?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. As far as your COSR, do you capture all outside service reports?
Well, we do the best we can. That is our goal. We hound them. I hold my technicians personally responsible, because anytime a vendor is called in, one of my techs is doing that call in, and my techs are tracking them down, and they can't close out their work order until they have the field service report or the invoice in hand.
Great. And do you develop an internal education program on specific devices? You train a person, they in turn train the team, or is training strictly vendor?
No, that's a good question. We do both. So it's expected when my folks go out to training that they come back, and every morning, once a month, we have our department meeting, and it's set up for 2 hours. The first hour is training, where we go over just that. Is someone who's gone out to training, the expectation is they come in here and they give an overview of what it is that they learned on that particular device. We also had a time for about 9 months that we went through, and we started at basic electronics and worked all the way from basic electronics to advanced electronic theory. Refresher, getting folks in there and say, oh yeah, I remember that from school, and walking through that, as well as using that as an opportunity to help my inspectors learn more about the electronics, because they don't usually have the formal training. So we went through that process, and it's really worked out well.
Okay, and how do you deal with the vendors who provide service manuals?
How do I deal with them for the ones that don't provide service manuals? That's the $64,000 question, I think, that our industry's been dealing with for a long time. Is we put it within our contract when we buy the equipment, as well as within our service contract, that if I don't get 2 copies of the service contract to include maintenance instructions, et cetera, that we won't pay for it. I wish I could say that was 100% that we were able to do that, because that goes down back to purchasing, and I'm relying on them to put that into the purchase contracts. I see the majority of them, but there's the few that get by that we're still working on that and getting it done. But we're much better than we were several years ago.
Excellent. And one reader said you changed a significant number of techs within 5 years. What was the reaction among the rest of your staff?
So the ones that left weren't, like I said, you change the people or you change the people. So really, I added 10 people, and I had 20 new. So 10 people that I added are those 10, and 50% of the old staff left. They didn't want to change. They didn't want to get on board. They didn't want. Some of the people had been here. So when you have people that have been in an organization for quite a long time, there's two things. One, it's good that they have that corporate knowledge. They know what things are, where places are, who to talk to. The other bad side of it is they don't want to change. That's the way I've always done it, and that's the way I'm always going to do it, and you're not going to make me do anything different. So they leave. I didn't fire them. They left. So, and the rest of the staff, you know, as they say, bad apples spoil the bunch. It wasn't taken too poorly for the most part.
Great. And do you have any productivity standards protocols for your staff?
Yeah, we use 85% is a productivity. But now, what is productivity? Productivity is it turning a wrench? Is it whatnot? So I use that as, you got to look at it, is it documented time versus paid time? Is that productivity? No, that's just documented time. Productivity is, am I turning a wrench? Now, documented time is expected to be at right at 100%, but just because I have 15% of time that's not productive doesn't mean that it's not good time. People use productive, non-productive. It's really, you know, non-productive time isn't bad time because you know, I'm asking them to round with the customer. I'm asking them to go to meetings, etc. And that doesn't mean that that's bad time. It's just not productive. My definition and the definition we've come here as productive is, are you turning a wrench, yes or no? Very binary. You either are or you aren't. And if you aren't, it's not productive. But it's not bad time.
And here's another listener one. What is the time ratio of repair versus PM your staff spends every day?
Well, because my staff only concentrate on the high-end stuff, really depends on the modality. The imaging folks, obviously, they're doing more of the PMs by device count than my biomeds, because I have the inspector groups that spend 100% of their time, and the other groups, it depends on the month, depends on what their modality. So that's really hard to say what exactly that percentage is, but you know, I wish I had a better exact figure, but I just don't.
Okay. In gathering data, what kind of objectives did you set in order to obtain KPIs?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
I will read it again and see if I can do it again. Okay. In gathering data, what kind of objectives did you set in order to obtain KPIs?
Well, I mean, you have your standard. I think I'm going to try to answer it this way. You have your standards, you know, like your percent completion, et cetera. But then, you know, what we also look at is, you know, time to repair, turnaround time, mean time between failures. A lot of those, we go through that and make sure that that's there for that KPI. You know, because downtime for the devices is not necessarily just because of the cost of the part that I'm going to buy, especially in CTs, is, you know, for every, you know, hour that machine is down, we're losing, not just, you know, for internal profit is we go on $1,500 an hour. So me saving $200 on a part, you know, but it's going to take me an extra 8 hours to get the part is not cost worthy. So we look at that a lot and balance that against the department's actual operational time and utilization of the devices.
Okay, and how have you gone about changing the morale of the team, and what did you find most effective?
So that's a real good question. So I think some of the morale changed just on the people that didn't really want to be here leaving. So that kind of is a sigh of relief on some folks. The other is just really, you know, having those frequent conversations with everybody. We actually built a couple of teamwork groups when we first got here on communication, teamwork, and respect. And how do we build that? And I broke the entire department. No one could not participate. Broke the entire department into the 3 groups and had them lead their own organization. I was not present, and neither were my supervisors. It was them developing these programs, these initiatives, and we actually did what they wanted. So if they wanted to, well, we have to have a luncheon once a month. We did it for, not forever, but whatever it was to build that camaraderie, that teamwork, that respect for each other. We put different things on the walls. We had different sayings going on. So it really worked. They pushed the initiative to bring the teams together. It was not me, and by allowing them to do that, I think is what really helped change the morale and the team mentality and attitude within clinical engineering.
Great. And do you have a vendor for defibrillator repairs, or do you have a technician that works on them?
We do them internally.
Great. And what type of database tracking software are you using?
I'm using it's a fairly new one off the block. I don't want to promote one organization over another, one type over another. They all have their benefits or not. This one's a fairly new vendor, and it works off of the ServiceNow platform, but that's not a ServiceNow organization. So I really am not comfortable giving out that vendor at this point because I didn't get their permission to give their name.
Okay, and how did you get clinical acceptance of biomeds performing DI services? Also, what are the hours of service you provide?
DI services, I'm not sure. Digital imaging, I'm assuming. So repeat that question one more time.
Sure. How did you get clinical acceptance of biomeds performing DI services? Also, what are the hours of service you provide?
We provide, so first of all, the easy question is our service is essentially, day shift hours as well as we have people on call 24 hours. How did I get their clinical acceptance? Was talking with them, showing them what we were going to do, the training plans. I showed them the training plans, when we sent them to the vendors that we're sitting right next to the GE or the Siemens technician. They're going through the exact same classes. We went through that, and they were okay, well, we'll give you a little chance here, and you just got to keep building it up. And that's one of the good reasons of putting the roll-down clauses in your contracts. Just because you went to school today doesn't mean you're fully competent on it today. So we're able to then slowly roll these contracts down as our competencies get better and better, and our customers are giving us that leeway. Imaging here, especially outpatient imaging, was very difficult. That was a hard nut to crack, but we got through it. And then by the time we said, okay, we're gonna start working on all your MRI machines, they said, okay, when? I mean, that was as simple as that. So it was, we broke through. We developed that confidence in them, and it's hard to build, easy to lose, but we did do it.
Okay, and do the inspectors only do the PMs? And what if during the PM they find the device is not 100%? Do they fix it, or do they turn it over to the biomed tech?
Depends on what the issue is. If it's a cord that's got a tear or the plug is bad, they'll do that. Otherwise, they will close the work order as a failed PM, and they bring the device down, depending on the device. If they can bring it here back to the shop, they do. And then it will go to the biomeds. Otherwise, they fail it, they tag the device as out of service, and then the biomeds will go up there to the device to fix it.
Great. And have you started utilizing AEM in your management plan? And if yes, how successful have you been?
Yes, we have. We've been, I believe, very successful in it. So like IV pumps, we do not do PMs on our IV pumps, and I have a couple thousand of them. That's a lot of time that we're using on them. We tend to see 35%, 30% of them every year anyway, just based on the type of pump we have, the use that they're getting. So that we definitely have them on the AEM, and it works out. And we, the AEM is it's tricky. It's fairly new. You got to look at what you're looking at, what you're doing. You can't, you just don't want to AEM everything. As I said, slow and steady wins the race. You look at each individual one. One of the good things that we're doing is we're having, as part of the competencies that we do, is the inspectors, as well as the biomeds, as every time they go out and they're doing PMs, they're validating that PM against the service manual, against the device, and making sure that it all makes sense. We found several, especially older devices, where the manuals just didn't match up to the actual device. And so we're going through, and then whether we're applying the manufacturer or whether we're applying a generic PM procedure or we're modifying it ourselves based on AEM data. And so that's been really successful too as well in building up that their competencies and validating. And they have to take that to a senior biomed, because senior biomed is not just a pay grade. It's a responsibility. And we use that, and the senior biomeds have to sign off on that validation.
Wonderful. And what's your stance on CBET certified techs? Are there incentives for staff that achieve certification?
So that's a very good question. So I'm certified. I have several of my techs that are certified. I think that certification is very important, and it is needed. I try to push that onto my techs. We pay for their certification. I give them time to study. Outside of that, no, we don't. I don't put that as a requirement for promotion or anything. But some organizations do, and I can see the benefit to it. We just don't at this time.
Okay, and how do you prevent a huge manufacturer coming to the C-suite and telling them they can do better?
Well, that's a very good question. So that usually is the manufacturer or third-party independent service organization. Luckily here, that's where you have, in this organization, when you have to build those relationships with that C-suite and let them they have to see what you're doing, and with that communication, and it has happened a few times since I've been here. They're calling me. They're saying, "Hey, these people are reaching out. They're saying this," and then we have that conversation. And so far, I've been successful in keeping them off. Because I'm doing a lot of the same things that they're doing. So if we can keep it in house and we can keep that, the team, because if a third party comes in, typically they replace, all the employees become their employees, depending on that, that ISO. And our organization doesn't really like that. We had a lot of outsourced things at times, the kitchen, environmental, etc., and they're all back in house now because that's the culture here. They prefer that. And I'm lucky that I have that culture here. Some organizations do not, unfortunately.
Great, and I have one more great listener question. It says, "Hi Blake, hello from San Diego. Congrats. I too am a retired Navy BMET. What are your next goals and steps to continue with your success?"
Well, so I have moved several times in the Navy. I lived in 11 states. I've moved quite a bit. I have about 10 years left, and my success is that I lasted here for my next 10 years. I get offers, like almost everybody does, to go different places, and I'm happy here. And my success is that if my department grows, my customers and my patients are taken care of, and that my staff has the ability to grow and to develop, then I'm successful and I'm happy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I want to conclude by saying thank you to our presenter who did a wonderful job, as well as our audience members and our sponsor, PartSource. Today's webinar is being recorded, so you may rewatch for free anytime in the next year using the same link you used to log on today. And feel free to share the links with colleagues who may have missed today's live event. Also, please email me at kstevens, and that's Stevens with PH at Medcore, and that's medqor.com, with questions, comments, and future webinar suggestions. And also, please be sure to visit us at www.24x7mag.com. Thanks again for participating in 24x7 Magazine's webinar, Clinical Engineering Excellence, a new model to drive team effectiveness. Have a wonderful day.